Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and this is week 6 of the Dear Jane Quilt Along that I'm doing in 2024. A lot of you are following along, but if you're new here today, I'm using EQ8, and EQ8 has a Dear Jane add-on for it, and that is what I'm using to print all my templates or foundation paper piecing. If you don't want to watch any of the EQ8 stuff that I'm going to show, then in the description down below, you can find time codes to construction of the blocks that we're doing today. So this week, pretty straightforward with our blocks. We don't have anything that's too out of this world. The blocks we're going to be doing are, let's see, B6 Wild Goose Chase right here. And I am going to pick that and I'm going to put it up here in the B6 spot. I am using dark green fabrics this week. So that's why I have my 5 blocks in dark green. So this is quite, I don't think it's going to be a hard block to do. It's just that you're going to have a lot of little pieces to work with on this one. Next one we have is K6. Which one is that? K6 is Anne's Follies. It's down here. And I actually chose variation 1. And the reason I did that is you can see down here that in between the 2 green strips, that white strip is a little bit wider. And that's how it is in Dear Jane's quilt. And I don't think it makes a big difference, at least to me, how wide that strip is. So the center block that she has all 3 of the green, the white, and the other green strip are the same size, but I chose variation 1. You can do either one you want. They're going to be put together exactly the same. It's just the size of the strip. So let's put that over here in K6. And then we've got, and I don't think that's going to be too hard either. It incorporates a lot of the things we've been doing in the past. It's just going to have a lot of pieces. K13 is Brandon Star, and that is up here at the top. So this is really straightforward. You could probably rotary cut this if you want to, but I feel like for me, foundation paper piecing gives me a much more square block. So we've got K13, so let's put that down here. And then we have M5, Mother's Point. And that is this one right here. So this one is pretty straightforward too. I'm going to set it over here. I want to go over into the block work table and show you a little something about this block. Maybe teach you a little something you didn't know about EQ8. But before we do that, let's go to our border block that we're doing, which is TR6. That's right here. I'll show you printing that real quick because that has both foundation paper piece and applique in it. All right, let's place that. So that's what I'm looking at through week 6 with colors, and I'm happy with it. So I'm not going to change out of my dark green for any of these. So let's go over to the block work table, and I want to show you how to section and number a paper piece. All right, I am in the block work table, and if you've printed foundation paper pieces, then you've probably seen, or you know, that EQ8 sections and numbers these pieces for you. If you've not really gone into sectioning and number in EQ8, then I want to do that right now and show you what it's like, and just give you a little bit of ideas of what maybe to look for while you're in there. And I'm going to use this block. It's M5 Mother's Point, and I'm going to resection and renumber this pretty much the same way that EQ8 does, because I think EQ8 does a pretty good job of numbering and sectioning these foundation paper pieces. But I just want to show you what it's like once you're in there, if you ever want to look in there and take a peek and see if maybe you want to renumber or possibly even resection or build your own block and do your sections and numbers. So what you want to do is you want to be in the block work table, and I have the block open that I want, and we need to be in print and export. And we're going to go to foundation just like we would if we were to print this block out. So I've been playing with this block, so it may not look exactly like yours looks, but it is essentially the same way that EQ8 initially sectioned and numbered it. So the colors are the sections, and it always brings me to the sections. That must be the default for this window. And you can see the sections here. If you click on the numbering, you can see each section has been numbered. So we start with A1, A2, A3 right here, and then there's B1, B2, B3 right here. What I want to show you is if you were to section and number it yourself, I am going to slightly renumber this, but I'm going to section it exactly the same way. I am going to come down here and I'm going to hit start over, and it gives us a blank slate. What you need to do is you can't add into a section something seams that don't connect. So our first section was here. It was A. So those are the 3 pieces in our first section, and you can see that the first 2 pieces have a seam, and then when those 2 pieces are together, the top one has a seam, and we can't add any more pieces to it. There's nothing, no seams long enough. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom on the right and hit group, and it assigns a color to that group. So the bottom section is going to be exactly the same. I'm going to hit group. I'm going to come over here, and just because we're working in the center section, I'm going to do the same thing and finish these out. So there's our 4 groups that look like this. The next group we had were this big square and this skinny strip was a group. So I'm going to come back down here to the right side and do the same thing and group that. And now we can just have these pieces alone as their own groups. They have a seam big enough to put here. All right, so EQ8 has already gone ahead and numbered these sections I put in. So let's take a look at the numbering. It looks pretty good. And this is how I printed it and did it. But one thing I found out when I was doing this was, let's take a look at the A1 or the A section and the B section right here. And in paper piecing, we know that we always iron towards the larger number. So in the A section, we'll put A1 and A2 together, and we're going to iron towards A2. But if you take a look at the B section, we're going to put B1 and B2 together and iron towards B2, and we don't have nesting seams here in the middle. So what we can do is come back and renumber these. So let's go and change our numbers so that we can get nesting seams in here. So I'm going to come down to the right and I'm going to hit change numbers. So the numbers that EQ8 gave us are still here. So that can help us. And I'm still going to keep A1, A2, A3 the same. But I'm going to change B1 to be over here on the right and B2 to be on the left, and then B3. I'm going to come down here and do the same thing in the left-hand corner, keep C1, C2, C3 intact, but change D1 to the right and D2 to the left, and then add D3. I'm going to keep E1, E2 the same, F1, F2 the same, because these nest, and then we've got G1 and H1. So that's how you can change your numbers, change your sections if you want to. Mostly it may be numbers like this where you can recognize that, oh, I want nested seams right here. Let's change these numbers. It's pretty easy to change. So there you go. You hit finish. We can hit preview. And you can see that because it mirrors it, we have our changes here in our paper pieces. So there you go. That's just a quick little, if you've never been in this part of EQ8, little introduction to how it works, and I just wanted to show you. I thought this one was relevant because when I put the block together, I have put it together, I found that my seams, didn't even think about it, my seams didn't nest right there. So just wanted to come back and show that to you. So I hope you found that helpful. If you want to see any more in the coming weeks, hit the subscribe button, notification bell if you're doing the quilt along with us also, and you'll get notified of all my content. But anyway, let's get started. All right, this week I'm going to be starting with B6 Wild Goose Chase. I've got my pieces cut, and don't forget, if you want to use my cut piece measurements, I have a link to my website down below. You can go over there and you can use the same measurements I do. And I do update my measurements if some of these don't work for me. So to get started, I've laid them next to each of these that I've cut. O1, N1, P1, and this little tiny Q1. And then these little rectangles are going to go here, A1, B1, F2, E2. These longer ones, what I should say is these really long ones are going to be the F4, E4, A4, B4 in these 4 pieces. And then the rest of these are everything else we have to do in here. So there's a lot of these because they'll fit all these white strips. And all the triangles are the same for all my pieces. So they'll be a little big for this one, but it's just easier to cut them all the same size. All right, let me get these pieces cut out and let's start making this block. And I want to remind you, that's the block I'm going for right there, Wild Goose Chase. All right, here's my pieces cut out, and I pretty much have 4 of the same here in each pile, and then just my strips that are set by themselves. So what I'm going to do is just put together one of these and one of these. And then this one's pretty easy. It's just 2 pieces that you put together. It'll be very similar to this one, except you don't have all the extra pieces. So I'm not going to put that one together. So I'll put these 2 together and we'll put the entire block together. All right, to get started with this piece, I've drawn it on the back. I've drawn the outer seam allowance and then the sewing lines on the middle. So our number 1 piece is right here, which is a white. And our number 2 piece is a green, so we need a green triangle. And we need the small white rectangle. So let's cover our 1 by 1/4 of an inch between 1 and 2. Make sure we got plenty of coverage, and we do. You can see that our triangle is going to sit like this. So I'm going to flip it over. And we have plenty of coverage. So right here on this line, lock stitching at each end. All right, my first 2 pieces are put on. Now we want to go between 2 and 3 and trim. And then at this point, we want to go with these medium sized rectangles. And we just need to make sure we are going to have coverage out here and at this seam. And we have plenty. So we want to sew with a lock stitch here all the way off the seam allowance. There's my first 3 pieces. We need to turn it over, trim between the A2, A3, A1, and A4 right here, and grab our long rectangle. And we just want to make sure that our edges are going to be at our corners here, so we have plenty of coverage. So all the way along this line right here, not this one, and lock stitch at the intersections. All right, there's our finished triangular piece, and I finished the others also. So I'm going to set those aside. We get started on this tiny little piece. We have 2 even tinier pieces that are exactly like that. So I'm going to do this one. We are going to need the last 2 of our small rectangles. Well, the 1. It's 2 for these bottoms here. We're going to need a medium-sized rectangle and 2 triangles. All right, I have drawn on the back of this. This is our outside seam allowance, and these are our sewing lines on the inside. I put 1 in G for green, 2, 3 in G for green, and 4. So I know what colors go where. So our number one piece right here, basically we need coverage like that, is our triangle. And it gets oriented like this, and this is 1/4 of an inch right here. So I'm just going to line it up with that line. And then we need to take the longer of our, and that's this one, the longer of our rectangles, and I'm just going to center it here. It's plenty big. Comes off the seam allowances there. So we need to sew here, lock stitch, and sew off. Right, there's my first 2 pieces. Now we need to go between C2 and C3, trim up, add our triangle, which will be oriented this way. So we want to flip it over. It's plenty big. We got plenty of coverage. And then from here, we want to lock stitch here, sew, lock stitch, and sew off. There we go. There's our 2 triangles and our center strip. Now we want to do our bottom strip. So we go to C4, fold on the line, trim, and we want to pull, or no, these are the ones we want. These are the last 2 we need. And you can see they're plenty big because we just need coverage on both 2 of these lines actually. All right. So on the line, lock stitch at the intersections. All right, there's my small piece. I'm going to finish the other 3 I have here. This one is going to be just like putting this together. It's just a triangle and a strip that we're going to put together. So I'll finish those out and then we can put the whole block together. All right, I got my pieces laid out here. This was a little puzzly to put together. We want to make sure we have a square with, or diamond, whichever way you look at it, with these thin strips in here. And then we want to complete this plus sign in the middle. So that's why these are oriented this way. And then these pieces are going to go on each edge when we get finished putting the center together. And then these 4 pieces are going to go on each edge once we get this center put together. So the first things we need to do is put these 2 here together and then join them to this center to make this square unit. And I'm going to do that, and I'm going to iron my seams open. All right, here's our tiny little center square. And now we want to add these 4 to the outside. And as you can see, I've notched these ends. So when we put them on, those notches should line up on the edges. And they do. So we want to sew along this line right here and lock stitch at these intersections or points. I think what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to iron towards my triangle here, and then I'm going to go ahead and add all the other 3 on once I'm done with that. All right, here's my square in the middle, and we need to put these triangles on exactly the same way we put the last triangles on. Line them up, and if you have cut the notches, they will line up on the edges of our square. So again, I'm going to sew these on and iron towards the triangle. All right, to finish off this block, we are going to put our shortest end. I'm just putting mine at the top. I'm going to sew it on, iron towards the strip, put these 2 strips on the side, iron towards that strip, and then finally the last strip I'm going to put on, and I'm going to iron towards that strip, and our block will be done. B6 Wild Goose Chase. There we go. There's our B6 Wild Goose Chase. That was a lot of fun to put together. I really enjoyed that one. That's what it looks like, and that's what mine looks like. So, woohoo! First one down. All right, let's work on K6 and Folly, and I'm doing variation 1 from the EQ8 Dear Jane add-on. And if you look here, the way she drew it, these strips right here are the same size, but when I look at Dear Jane's, I think that the center strip is wider. So that's why I went with the variation one. It has the wider center strip. So I've got my pieces cut, and again, you can find a link to my website down below if you want to use the same cut pieces I have. Let's start with white. These rectangles are the 4 center ones here. These small ones all go in these end pieces over here. These big triangles are right here in the middle. For the green, these rectangles go on each side of the white in the middle. These long ones are on these side pieces. This one square goes in the middle, and these triangles are on the end. So I will put together one of these end units, and I'll put together this center unit because these are just putting them together in rows. This one's the same as that, and this one's the same as that. So I'll do these 2 pieces right here. All right, I'm going to start in the corner here. And A1, A2 is how we're going to start. Turn it over. I forgot to mark which ones were which. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't mark the outline because it's basically the edge of the paper. And this is a green and a green and a green. So I need my 2 green rectangles I cut for these pieces. No, I need a green and a white. I'm sorry. So I want to put in green and white together. Green is number 1. That goes on the bottom. I'm going to put it over my number 2 about 1/4 of an inch. We're at the edge of the paper, so we have coverage. We've got at least 1/4 of an inch here. So we have coverage, so we're looking good. So we want to sew, starting here, lock stitch, and lock stitch there. All right, there is my first 2 pieces put on. We need to do A3 on the other side. I've grabbed my other green piece, but we need to trim. And line it up so that we have coverage. I have coverage off the end of the paper. Let me push it up. You can't see it, but right there's the line. So I have coverage on both my lines there. So let's sew on the line, lock stitch at your intersections. All right, A1, A2, A3 is put on. Now A4 is our little triangle up here. So let's get trimmed up and ready to go. So here's my little triangles. I am going to, I'm centering my point because it's centered with the middle of this row or this strip anyway. So center your point down here in your center strip and sew across, lock stitching at our intersections. All right, A1, A2, A3, A4 are put on. So let's go to A5. It's going to be one of our triangles. We'll trim that up and get ready. I guess I don't need the paper. All right, let's get one of our triangles, and the long edge is over here, so we need to orient it like that. I'm going to line it up. Right here's my edge, and there's my edge, so we're going to have plenty. We'll have plenty when we fold it over. So let's sew on this line, lock stitch there and there. And then I'm going to put A6 on. It's going to be exactly the same way as this one. All right, let's see. This is the piece I put together for you. That's what it looks like. And then I went ahead and put the second corner together. So let's move on to this one and let me draw it out. Okay, there it is drawn out. I've got 1, it's a green, 2 is a white, 3 is a green, 4 is a green, and 5 is a green. So with 1, we're going to take one of these rectangles here and We're going to put it 1/4 of an inch over 2. And we have coverage here on these lines. So I'm going to grab the same size for 2 and just sandwich these, or lay them together, right sides together. And we're going to sew, lock stitch there, lock stitch there. All right, there's my first 2 pieces. Let's turn it over, trim, so that we can put our 3rd piece on. And it's going to be a green strip. You can see right here, I need coverage there. So we have plenty of coverage. Lock stitch there, so lock stitch at the other side. All right, got my first 3 pieces on. You can see they're off the paper. We have plenty of coverage everywhere. Next piece is going to be our little tiny triangle at the top. So let's get trimmed up and ready for that. And grab a triangle. Again, I'm going to center it, just eyeball center it in this middle strip. And we can sew it on and lock stitch at intersections. Okay, there's my little triangle at the top. Got plenty of coverage. So we want to just take our square now, after we trim it, and add that on. And it's the only square we have in this block. So line it up so that your edges are outside these lines right there. And sew on the line, lock stitch at intersections. All right, here's the 2 pieces that I did. Here's the other one, put together exactly the same way. My 2 corners are done. Now I just need to do these edges. These are very straightforward. Just sew them together and sew on the line. I'm going to get these done. I'm going to get everything trimmed, and then we'll put our block together. All right, I've got everything sewn together, trimmed up. Here's my 4 outer edges. I'm just going to set those aside. Here's the 4 pieces that go on the inside. We need to first sew these 2 together, and I am going to iron towards this square right here because that will mean it will nest right here with these 2 pieces. So I'm going to do that first, and then we'll come back and put our triangles on. All right, there's these 2 pieces put together, and I ironed it towards that center square. So now we can put these together, and it does have notches. You can see that I've cut them so that it should line up on each side. And you can see that the notches do line up on each side of our center strip. So we can get this pinned up, and let's iron towards, let's see, why don't we iron this open? I'm going to iron mine open. All right, my center's done. And I ironed my seams open like I said. So now we need to put the outside pieces on. All right, that is a really pretty block, K6 Anne's Folly Variation 1. So the reason you need to keep track of the long and the short sides is because you want these corners to be symmetrical with each other. They need to be the same size. So you can see that how those all fit in putting our pieces together. It actually was like this. There's my short side, my 2 medium sides, and my long side. All right, that is really cool. I like that block. All right, to get started on K13 Brandon Star, this is a pretty straightforward block. So what I'm going to do is I'll just put together one of these over here. It gives us the flying goose and the squares. The rest of this is going to be exactly the same as this. So I have got squares. The white squares are for the center blocks here. The white triangles are for in the flying geese. The green triangles are the base of our flying geese, and then these green squares are all the squares in this block. So this one I think is going to be pretty easy to put together. All right, I forgot to mention this is the block we're going after with this paper piece. All right, so here's the piece I'm going to be doing. I've drawn it out at the back. We've got our first piece over here. It's a square. Second is a white triangle. Third, green triangle. Fourth, white triangle. Fifth, green square. So I need a green square. and a white triangle. So let's turn it over. What you can do if you want to is just kind of draw 1/4 of an inch into number 2. We can lay our square there. We have no line showing, so that means we have coverage. Our triangle is oriented this way, so let's flip it over, right sides together. Oh, I got off my 1/4 inch. So that way, when we flip it, we'll have coverage over to here. So basically, this is where we need coverage. All right, so on the line, lock stitch at seam intersections, and we'll come back and get it trimmed up and keep going. All right, there's my first 2 pieces. I do have coverage, but I have adjusted my cut pieces to be a little bit larger for when you get them off my website. So this will be a little larger than what I'm using right here. All right, let's turn it over. Let's go between 2 and 3 and trim, but I don't think I'm going to trim. There's just enough there. I'll just trim this tail right here. Now we need an green triangle. It's going to be oriented like this. I made this one plenty big. So flip it over. And that's what it's going to look like. Sew on the line and lock stitch at intersections. Okay, there's my 3rd piece, the green triangle. Flip it over. We're going to do the next white triangle. Let's trim it up. Let's see where we're at. Oh yeah, we had plenty of green. Okay, our white triangle is going to be oriented this way. Yep, that's correct. Just like that. So we want to flip it over. Again, I like to try to eyeball the corners, but it looks like I'm going to be lining right up with the green triangle. So let's get that sewn up. 4th piece is put on right here. And since I cut it pretty close, I probably have about 1/4 of an inch there. So we may just have a green tail. Like I said, the measurements I'll give you for that white triangle will be bigger, so you won't be so close. Grab another green square and just make sure that the edges fall outside the lines, and we're good. All right, there's the one piece I'm going to show you. It pretty much represents everything in this block. This is pretty easy to do. You're just putting the 3 together. Just follow the numbers in order. Make sure you've got coverage. So I'm going to finish this up and we'll put this block together. All right, here's all my pieces put together for K13 Brandon Star. This is what we want it to look like. I have laid it out wrong. There we go. It needs to go like that. And we need to put the center together. And I'm going to sew these 3 pieces together. I'm going to iron those open. Then I will add these 2 pieces on, iron it open, and then we can add these 2 on and iron it open. So that's how this is going to go together. It's pretty simple. We've probably all put together a very, very similar, if not exact, same block as this in the past, if you've done a lot of quilting. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's all put together. All right, there's my K13 Brandon Star. Looks like the one in the book. So we are done with that. I didn't go into that in much detail because if you have quilted, you've done that quite a few times, and it had some very easy paper piecing to do in that. So only 2 more blocks to go this week. All right, we're on to M5 Mother's Point. And if you remember, this is the one I kind of demonstrated how to do sections and numbering in EQ8. So you can kind of see how it goes together now once we did that. This is not going to be hard to put together at all. We've got 4 of the same pieces here, 2 here, and then these are going to go on the edges of our squares. So that's what I've got here. I've got 2 of these skinny singular pieces. These squares go in the center. These 2 are in the big pieces, the white pieces here. These 4 are the bottom of these center units. These are the center squares in the green, and these are the 2 big squares in green. I'm going to put together a big square and a center square, and then we'll put this block together. All right, here's the 2 pieces I'm going to put together. I've got my cut pieces ready to go. I'm going to start with this little piece and basically the paper edges, and these are our sew lines. And we have 1, 2, 3, and green goes there. So I need to start with my 2 squares. Just white and green. White is the first piece, so that's going to go on the bottom. I'm just going to put them together right now. It's about 1/4 of an inch. So white on the bottom, green on the top, and I'm going to lay them in line with this 1/4 inch. And you can see I have plenty of coverage. So I'm going to sew on the line between A3 or A1 and A2. From A3, lock stitch there, lock stitch, and then we'll put on A3. All right, here's my first 2 pieces put on. Now we need to trim along our A3 line. You can see I made these pieces plenty big. Now we need to take one of our rectangles we cut for these end pieces, our 3rd piece, and we will lay it, and it goes off the paper. So we are good to go. And remember, lock stitch at seam intersections. All right, there's one of my center pieces. I went ahead and finished the other 3 exactly the same as this one. That's what it looks like. And I'm going to trim everything up later. Okay, this one's going to be easy. But what I am going to do is I'm going to draw the sewing line so you can see. And then I'm going to draw 1/4 of an inch. Let's see, D1 is the big green piece. So I'm going to draw 1/4 of an inch out. So I just want to take a green and a long one of my white pieces. I'm going to just sandwich them like this. And since green is number 1, it's going to go on the bottom. I'm going to line it up with my 1/4 inch line. Edge is the paper. Here's the edge, so I've got room here to work. And then I'm just going to sew on the line, lock stitching at these seam intersections. There's these pieces done. So I'm going to get everything trimmed up, and then I'll show you how it all fits together, because we still have these 2 pieces to put on. Okay, here's all my pieces laid out how they will be in the block. And what we need to do is put together these 2 pieces right here and these 2 pieces. And I'm going to iron that open, and then we'll come back, and these singular pieces that I cut, which are those templates, will go on this side of the block. So it matches this border here. So I'm going to get that done. I'm going to iron my seams open too. There we go. I got these pieces done. I did have them in the wrong corners if I'm doing it exactly like that. So all we need to do now is connect these 2 here and then put our 2 rows together. So I'm going to again iron all my seams open, and our block will be done. There we go. Mother's Point is done. That was a fun block to put together. I'm telling you, this week's blocks are really cool. I really like them. So let's do the border block. All right, let's get started on TR6, Carla's Candle Flame. This is what it's going to look like. And I think this will be fairly straightforward. I'm going to put together this piece, and I'm going to put together this piece, because this center here is very similar or the same as these over here. So I'll put together these 2. The pieces I have, and again, I have my cut sizes on my website, which is in the link below if you want to use my cut sizes. I have these big pieces are for the A3 and A2 down here, and then this top triangle. These white squares are for these 4 larger triangles, and then these small ones are for all the little ones we see in here. This big green is for this piece down here. This one rectangle is for the E1, and then the rest of these are for the other 3 here. And then underneath all of this, I have my applique ready to cut out. The applique is going to be this piece, these 2 pieces right here. And all I didn't need this piece, is I traced it onto my fusible webbing along the seam line. So on mine, it's the dark solid line. We only need 1 of each. All right, there we go. Let me get my pieces cut out and we can get started. All right, here's the 2 pieces I'm going to do. I'm going to do this one second, this one first. We have E1 is the green, then E2, then it comes down here to E3, back up here to E4, E5, E6. The only green piece is in the middle, the rest are white. So I've drawn this out on the other side. I put a G here to remind myself that number 1 is the green color. I have a rectangle, so I want to just set it over top of the triangle that I need, making sure that everything's covered. And I'm going to clip this in place. And now I want to trim it. So I'm going to turn it back over, go to my E2. Grab my add a quarter and trim. Could pin it in place too. All right. Make sure it still looks good. Yep, it's still 1/4 of an inch. So I want to grab one of my smaller white rectangles. I'm going to lay it over so that I have plenty of space on each side of this line. So now I can sew from here lock stitch to here lock stitch. Okay, there's my first 2 pieces, and because it is sewn in place now, I don't need to have it pinned in place, and I still have plenty of coverage. All right, let me turn it over. Let's put on our 3rd piece. We'll trim. And now I want one of my larger squares. And I'm just going to lay it on here. There's the seam allowance, and there's the seam allowance. So we have plenty of room. And sew on the line between E1, E2, and E3. Lock stitch at intersections. 3rd piece, plenty big. Let's go back. And E4 is another one of these small triangles. Get her trimmed up. Take a small rectangle. Line it up so we have plenty on each side. And sew and lock stitch. There's the small rectangle and the small triangle done. All right, we'll go back to this side. E5. Oh, oh no, I did it right. E5 is just like E3. Trim. Grab one of these bigger squares. Lay it down so we have coverage, which is right there and right there and out here. So plenty of coverage on that one. So on the line between E5. Okay, there's the bottom pieces put on. Now we just need our last piece. This one's pretty simple. Let's fold it and trim it. This is where we want one of these longer pieces. Let's line it up so it's on each side of that seam allowance, which is right here. And you can see I have room. It's just getting skinnier. All right, let's sew this last one on along the line right here. All right, here's our top piece put together. This center, like I said, is very similar to the other pieces we have here. All right, I'm going to set that aside. I will trim it later. And now I want to get to this piece. I think it's going to be pretty easy. I've drawn out the seam lines on the other side. Our first piece is going to be the big green piece, and then second is a white, and third is a white. So that's what this big piece here is for. And that's going to cover the entire piece. So I will clip it. Where's 2? Let's do it over here. And I want to trim it here at 2. Now I want to grab, that's what these 2 longer pieces are for down here, for these big corners. And you kind of want to center it, make sure your edges, seam allowance, seam allowance is right there and right there. So we have plenty of room. Always need plenty of room. So sew on the line between A1 and A2. All right, there's the first 2 pieces. Third piece is going to be just like that first piece. Fold and trim. Add one of the longer, let's get this on the line. There we go. Can use one of the other longer rectangles again here also. Make sure we have plenty of coverage, and we do. It's just going right off the paper. So I'll get this sewn on and we'll be done with this piece. All right, there's the bottom piece. Pretty easy to put together. I am going to get the rest of these put together and trim them up, and then we'll come back, we'll assemble and add the applique. All right, there are my pieces, and now it's time to assemble. So the top and the bottom are already done. We need to put these 3 pieces together. And there are notches cut here and up here. So let's see how it fits together. It's really hard to see, but there is a little bit of a tail. The point of the notch hits this edge, and it also hits this edge, and there is a tiny little tail on each side. So we want to sew this. Let's iron this open for now. I'll see what it looks like when it's open and laying there. Right, here's my first 2 pieces put together. Do the same thing with this one. If you got the notches, let's line the points up on the edges, have little tiny tails, and sew it together, and ironing it open worked out. So I'm going to do that. All right, there's my centerpiece done. That really pretty argyle type look. So now we need to attach this to the bottom, and then the top to this one. Same thing, just line up the ends of your notches on the ends of each of the sides here. Sew on the line, iron open, and then I'm going to add the top the same way. All right, there's my triangle put together, and to finish this block off, we've got our little applique pieces, which I have cut out. I've got the glue on the back, my fusible webbing, and what you do is you're just going to line it up with this point. I'm just going to eyeball it, and then I'm going to take this one. I'm going to line that point up too. There you go. I am going to fuse that down, and our block this one, TR6 Carla's candle flame will be done. There it is. I fused down the applique and that is a beautiful block. Not too hard to put together. I really enjoyed putting these blocks together this week. They're all really pretty blocks. All right, I finished all my blocks for this week, and I gotta say I really enjoyed doing these blocks. I thought they were a lot of fun. They're visually appealing to me. So I've taken pictures of them, and it's time to add them to my quilt. So I am in my photo quilt, and I'm in the design section of the quilt work table under photo tools. I've scrolled all the way to the right. I've already added my photos, as you can see. So let's start at the top with TR6. That's my block. I'm going to click on the picture and add it there. So it's coming along. Next is B6 Wild Goose Chase. That's right here. Let's add it to B6. We are filling it in. It's so exciting. All right, next one was K6 and Folly. That's down here. Let's go to K6. Then we did K13, Brandon Star. And that's this one. We've done a lot of the bottom of this quilt. And then M5 Mother's Point. We've seen a lot of Mother's Point in this video. So there we go. That's what my quilt looks like now with all my photos of my blocks in it. And it's been so much fun doing this. I hope you consider hitting the subscribe button and notification bell and get notified of this type of content and all the other content I got going. Let me know how it's going for you. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.